over. It didn't feel like we'd ever get a government after the results that we got. But here we are in a government of national unity, in a coalition, in whatever you want to call it. And at the top of my agenda, and I think our agendas as the feminists that we are, is really what is happening. And what does this mean for feminist issues? What does this mean for women, girls, LGBTQI plus community, and all the other minority groups that exist within society, right? And Ayanda, what are your thoughts? How do you feel?
As the non-voter that you are, one who did not contribute to this GNU. I did not create the mess. I did not contribute to this GNU.
Well, you did.
I did.
Your lack of participation was participation.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I did not make parts of the voter turnout. If you see that abysmal number, I'm not part of that. That also paints a story in and of itself.
Yep.
But we're not talking about that. Look, I'm relieved that we have a government. I'm relieved that we have a cabinet. The composition of that cabinet, however, I'm not happy about that. I was never going to be happy about it in the first place because of the people who are now within that cabinet. The track record of those people in parliament, their work in politics, their work in activism, their ideologies, some of them are really worrying. The Democratic Alliance, in particular, if we read the manifesto of the Democratic Alliance, if we look at the election, at the roadmap towards the elections and after, the rhetoric that was being spoken, the fact that it wasn't, for me, the messaging wasn't necessarily about the people, but it was more about creating enemies, which is really a criticism that I have across the board.
Yeah, I think
in
it was
general.
not just them.
Yeah, it was not just them, but it's kind of like just across the board. And now what we have been seeing is the results of that. If we even look before the election campaign, there was all of this fear-mongering in and amongst political organizations, and thus it's resulted in this. I'm happy for some.
Yeah.
Very few, and I say very few, and I'm only going to say two specifically.
Tell
two.
us more.
I'm happy for Siviwe Khwarube. I'm happy that Mapasega Steve Letsitsi is finally in government. I'm happy. The reasons why I'm happy is because those two, for different reasons. One, because Siviwe has a strong parliamentary record.
Yes,
one
that she does.
That can be followed. One where you can see the work that has been put in, regardless of a political organization. There are other people in parliament who work extremely hard, regardless of their political organizations. You can see that they are hard workers. And Naledi Chiwa is one of them. Her parliamentary record, for me, in my opinion, her work in the Health and Parliamentary Committee, stellar.
But she's not back in parliament.
She's not back in parliament
the legislature.
now. She's now in the Gauteng legislature. But in the last iteration, one of the star, in my opinion, Siviwe as well. And I say outside of the interference of the political of her political party when it comes to the commentary and the different kinds of speeches that she has said in parliament, where you can clearly see that she is being led by her chief whip here, and she is being led by her own intelligence here. Yeah. Outside of that, brilliant job. And so I believe those two people are the ones who are key within the GNU, who will do well when it comes to feminist ideologies within their different departments that they're working in.
Phinah, we had the deputy minister at our Feminist Leadership and Activism Center graduations very recently. And, just piggybacking on what Ayanda's talking about and the deputy minister's track record in civil society and the work she has done towards the queer community's liberation and trying to move forward their human rights in the ways that she does. What do you think her position means for the rest of us?
And I like that you picked Steve, because that's also, where I'm like, at least we are doing something right, because it's not only about, representation, and I'm going to answer your question, Pontsho, but I think it speaks of representation. So not only is Steve representing the LGBTIQ community, but as a sector leader who has done so much in the HIV space, in the human rights space, for women, right? And women of all diversities, that for me says at least there's somebody who's in there who understands the issues on the ground.
Yeah.
So they are not just going to be issues that we talk about because we can talk about issues, but somebody who has lived, because she's bringing the lived experience. Being a queer person, openly so, I'm sure she has faced so many, issues in her journey, and I know if she were here to tell us the story, there are so many things that she can say. So that role is a powerful one.
Yeah.
And I like that even as she was introducing herself in that role, she was already touching the ground. It's not a role that is removed from the people.
Yeah.
It's a role that says, I'm here with you. And I like that when we invited her to our event, she said, I had other things, but I'm coming. And she stayed there. And the words she gave to the young people of encouragement shows you that it's not, I'm not talking because somebody wrote my speech. I'm talking because I understand the issues.
You understand the struggle. And Londi, this is where I want to bring you in, right? We're talking about our aspirations, our hopes and dreams for this government when we're thinking about issues about women. Where are you on the scale? Are you happy, sad, in between, not sure just yet? What's up?
Yeah. So, look, I think the GNU is a fair result, or at least is a reflective result of the way that our people, or the way that people are thinking about politics and the way that they're thinking about participating in democracy right now. Part of the reason you end up with a GNU, Grand Coalition, whatever it is that you want to call it, is because people like Ayanda are choosing not to participate. And that's not to pick on you, but it's just to say that there are most people who are eligible to vote, some of them who are registered to vote, are simply not showing up. That, to me, speaks to an issue with, or a disillusionment with the system. And so I'm just going to opt out of the system. It also speaks to maybe not having seen ourselves represented in previous governments. I know when I was opting out of voting, this was 2019, that particular election, there was simply no one on the ballot for me. There was no one on the ballot that I felt represented me as umuntu wesifazane, as a feminist, as all the multiple iterations of myself. I just didn't feel represented. And so I think that the constitution of the GNU, the way that we've gotten to the GNU, is clearly a reflection of where our society is in terms of how they feel about politics, how they feel about democracy, how they feel about politicians, and how they feel about their options. I found it interesting and maybe unsurprising that the way that the GNU is then constituted, is then put together, there is no consultative process at all with Abantu.
But what would a consultative process look like? Because that's also another thing. Yeah. And I think this idea of a community decision, or the idea of a consultative process, is involving people. But how does it happen when a government needs to be formed? I don't know about y'all, but I remember the uncertainty.
Were you anxious
over
about it?
Those few weeks, it was just, it was a lot.
But also maybe because you spoke about opting out, they still represent you even if you didn't.
Yes.
They
are your government.
And I think
they
for
are
me,
your government.
That's where, if you make the decision, it's like, whether I choose them or not, they still represent me. And so maybe you need to dig deep, in looking at, but who represents a bit of, even if they don't tick the whole list, but who speaks at least, to the issues that are very close to my heart.
And I think, honestly, for me, I tried.
You tried.
I tried that, and I just couldn't. I was wholly incapable. Where you saw yourself in 2019, I was the same also 2019. I was the same in the previous election as well. Wow. And I just found myself just unable to move because I realized that I'm a disillusioned African National Congress voter.
Yeah.
If the political party in 2007, well, no, let me reiterate. If the African National Congress in 2007 did not went to Congress and voted for example, Kodisang, I don't think that I'd be sitting here. I'd probably be in the African National Congress, sitting somewhere in Lutuli House or Walter Sisulu House, right? But now that did not happen.
Yeah.
Instead, what happened is that I saw a rape trial happen. I then had to see the women of power right in front of my eyes on Victoria Embankment Road hold each other and embrace each other after that tragic verdict. And that forever changed the political person and the political person. And as a woman, my feminism journey really started to take shape there. And so when I see myself as a person who is meant to vote into this government, you're right, Londi, I did not see myself represented at all. And there was not a snowball's chance in hell I was ever going to put my ex against somebody who I was going to represent.
You know, we're here, we have a government, and we need to make it work, and we need to push the issues that we want to push. Decriminalization of sex work. That's been on the table for how many years now?
Yes.
Right? And these are some of the issues. The National Strategic Plan for GBVF, right? When do we see the implementation? The National Strategic Plan for HIV and TB. These are issues that maybe don't look like they may be prioritized. For me, I haven't really heard the feminist GNU come out and like what is the prioritization of the issues that girls, women and LGBTQI people face in this country, because it seems like there are other political aspirations we've seen over the past few weeks, the priority areas for a lot of the politicians.
They never have been.
But I'm saying that's what we're seeing, and I was hoping that
that was a bit ambitious on your end, because obviously you spoke earlier about the DA, right? They are not for transformation. They were very clear. They were not even apologetic about the fact that they don't look at transformation the way it will fit us black people. Let's just call it what it is. So to think that now, because they are GNUing together, it will change.
Let's even look at the African National Congress. The manifesto literally says, under gender-based violence, it says, we will implement the GBV strategic plan. This plan was in 2020. They're only talking about implementing it now. Come on.
I don't think you have a feminist GNU. So if you had to describe our government, feminist wouldn't be the word I would use.
What word would you use?
Conservative,
capitalist. Look, I think that we haven't had a feminist government. And I think there were parts in our history where so even if those particular people wouldn't have termed themselves or called themselves feminists, but at the very least their governance strategies and ideas were pro-women, pro-poor, particularly black women, right? And so for me, I think, and also just, you know, on a very basic human level, caring about each other's human rights. For me, in our history, in our 30 years, I can point to moments where I'm like, yes, shame, you know, we were almost there. But I am struggling right now with the deprioritization of the kinds of things that you are talking about. Right now, the priority is to consolidate power. That's what we're doing.
So I'm not necessarily saying that I expected the government to be feminist or a feminist GNU, but I expected or hoped for or aspired to some kind of looking and intentional ways in which we try and make the things that I've mentioned happen, right? Like you think about the former Deputy Minister of Justice, and how he was with the sex workers. He stood in solidarity with them for so many years, even when the South African law reform commissions report, the SALRC report came out, which still didn't recognize sex work as decent work. He stood by them, you know. But like just thinking about things that are there, we do know the issues that are there around GBV in this country. But even in the manifestos of these parties, most of them talked about crime, corruption, and didn't talk about issues that are plaguing our society. Or it was one-liners.
It was one-liners.
Maybe two lines if they were being
caveat.
generous.
A caveat.
Not a caveat.
Yeah,
It's a caveat.
yeah.
GBV, but GBV is a caveat, honestly, in our society. It's a caveat. It's a tick box exercise. It's a summit that we do once a year, where we invite all of our political elites. And then it's over and done with. And then we plan the next one. The fact that they even have the audacity to plan the next one. They shouldn't be. They should not be. It should not be existing. Yet here we are.
We should be implementing.
We should be at the stage in which we are implementing. But because GBV is a caveat, we are going to have instances where we're just going to be putting a Band-Aid over a wound instead of actually fixing the very issues that we are currently plaguing GBV right now. In the Eastern Cape, the MEC just announced, when was it? Last week, the MEC of Social Development announced a project called the Parenting, it's a parenting project. Yes, that is meant to teach poor people how to parent. Imagine in the Eastern Cape, where there's half of the Eastern Cape, of the people in the Eastern Cape are not working, 49.7% of unemployment expanded.
And they're doing that because of the levels of suicide and killings, really, by women who found themselves so desperate to feed their children that they thought death of not only their own death, but the death of these children was better than living in this world.
But do you see the problem solution gap? People are poor.
Yes.
So they can't eat for 5, 7, 10 days at a time. And so they choose to commit suicide and to take the lives of their children as well. Yeah. The solution is to have a parenting program, not to deal with the poverty.
That's the issues that we have, and we're going to delve into them even more. Let's keep those. I can feel the fire now. We're burning. When we started, everyone was just now we're getting into the meat of things.
Fire.
So it's already hot, and we're in this. But I think, we have an audience here. No one can see them, but there's an audience, and they are really engaging us with incredible questions and commentary. And I think I just want to bring that in, so that we're just not speaking in silos. Do we think that the next politics or the GNU politics are going to be without masculinity, or are they going to be different in one way or the other? Considering, wait a minute, considering what we've said already around flagging certain people, the Deputy Minister of Women, the Minister of Basic Education, as people who have a potential to really be allies to the feminist or the issues of minority genders in one way or the other. So what do you think, Londi? You look like you are about to say something.
Okay. So, I don't think... So in as much as I think representation is important, because it's important to be able to see yourself. How nang mina, and this makes sense for myself, for my community, for my politics. It's important to be able to see that. I worry about us creating a situation, or rather the context that we find ourselves in, where that particular person, if ngayo Ayanda manje, uyedwa amongst how many people? One. Two, she's alone in a context that is patriarchal, that is antagonistic to women, that is antagonistic to anyone who's not a man in the way that we understand masculinity, right? And in the way that we understand politicians and politics to be, right? In that sort of grandstanding masculinity. And so I hope that one, Tina, as the people who then see ourselves represented kulabo bantu, we can on the ground somehow band together to back those people up. To create pockets of safety for them, that they can come back to and saying, can I just remind me what's the issue, what are we doing, and can I just breathe? But I'm not sure that we're going to get a different political culture out of this. I'm not
Can I
sure.
expand on that?
Yeah, you seem like you want to say something.
So let's look at the different ministries, right? And if we understand the politics of gender issues and gender norms, you see women being given ministries of care, which follows the
That
care.
was gonna be mine.
You know,
model.
it's like there's education, give it to women. You know,
Social
health,
development.
yeah, social development.
It
give
falls apart. It's the woman's fault.
Exactly. So really, that pattern continues, and that is why we never get to dismantle, because we were supposed to then change the politics of gender, even in how we allocate ministers and deputy ministers, but we kept the pattern the same.
And I'd like to stick there. You know, one of the things that we talk a lot about, particularly, is around care work and the unpaid labor of care work. What do you think this idea of women politicians being put in care work positions, what does it say about perceptions about women, one, but also perceptions about what is power, or what are powerful portfolios within
It's
the
about
cabinet?
soft power and hard power. It's about soft power and hard power. So the perception is that the hard power is in finance,
Yes.
military,
Yes.
defense.
Well, Angie got that.
Well, Angie
yay.
got that. Shout out to yes. But let's not go there.
The bar is in hell.
The bar is literally, it's class magma. But it's tough. So we have these kind of soft portfolios, soft in inverted commas, social development, education, youth, women, and persons with disabilities. And honestly, that stems from where we see women in society, right? So because we allowed you into the workspace, right, you're going to stay there and be a secretary, a secretary's assistant, a paralegal. You're not going to be a lawyer, though. Forget that. You're not going to be a partner, though. Forget that. You're not going to head the department. Never mind that. So it's giving women leeway, but the amount of leeway that we give you is always going to be controlled by misogyny and patriarchy. And so that is why the politics at which we see, the way in which our political parties are even structured, most of our political parties are headed by men. And so when we see women who do have the same feminist ideologies that we share here, but they are stifled by the political parties that they belong to, because the system in and of itself means that you're always going to be beholden to Lendota Lane, who's always going to be making decisions upon yourself. And if you do not impress this man, then you're going to lose your position. And then how it is that you're going to further these feminist ideologies that you have, because you're the one person who, again, that us group of people can go and hold you and create that safe space for you. But how is it that you are meant to create the work and do the work that you're meant to do within these masculine patriarchal political parties that we have, that we are all unfortunately beholden to?
And I think, you know, also when we think about what feminist issues are, health is feminist. We are living at an unprecedented time. I mean, all we've been doing is living in unprecedented times for the past few years, right? But like one of the biggest things is sexual reproductive health and rights. We, as it has been lauded by so many across the world, have one of the most progressive abortion laws in this country. I mean, in this world, right? And yet, abortion access continues to be an issue. Something that should be within, you know, a priority within the health department, but also in terms of, I would say, even public works, right? Our clinics, infrastructures are designed in the way that they can enable such services to be, you know, free, and accessible by where they are in the hospital. So what do we think about particularly sexual reproductive health and where it's going? Personally, I'm scared, right?
Can I just take
we're living in the worst times where sexual reproductive health rights are being curtailed left, right, and center. But Ayanda, you have something to say.
Absolutely. This is something that has been systematically going on since the 70s, the 80s, and so on. And it is something that it's a trajectory that we have been seeing here in South Africa since the Choice of Termination Act was signed into law in 1997, or 96, and then ratified in 1997. What we have seen is a systematic erosion of those rights in little tiny ways. It's giving nurses and or abortion providers an opportunity to say, you know what, I don't want to provide this service for you. You need to find somebody else. It's called conscientious. Yes, that's the word that I was looking for. We also have something that you have spoken so extensively about. I even wrote a book about it, about the religious the religious rights and how the religious rights has become so powerful on the African continent. And I'll even go as far as to say that countries next door, such as Namibia, they have to fight for the LGBTQA plus rights. They also have to fight for their sexual reproduction rights, because it is illegal to have an abortion in Namibia.
And which is a colonial law,
it's
by
a colonial
the way.
law, and that's what I was going to extend to, is that all of these laws actually stem from coloniality. And this is the problem here that we have, I believe, on the African continent, is that we refuse to actually go back to our own roots, because our own roots ourselves, we have actually forgotten where it is that we come from. We now have something that is so convoluted into colonialism that our own norms, values, and cultures have now been kicked out of the door in place of something that is religious and not of our own. And we need to go back to those roots in order to find out what we want as a society, something that is feminist, something that is going to protect us, and something that is for us and by us, and not by anyone else. And I swear to God, if we do not protect reproductive rights in this country, we are in trouble.
Phinah?
I think she said what I wanted to say, but maybe just to add, that SRHR and R, right, as being the key issue here. It's an enabling right for all the other rights. And we say in our constitution that we give you dignity of the human, right, and bodily autonomy, but that's the very same right that we take away. So it exists only on paper. And they know very well that on paper it's there. The government has signed, ratified, and done all it needs to do. But in terms of where it matters, because who has been fired for the fact that they refused to give access to that right?
Services.
And a young woman then goes to the streets and get killed there. A mother loses a child where they could have been provided a service free of charge. And people opt to go look for money, in ways that are also not enabling for them, because then you'll get this man who will abuse you in giving you that 400 where there is a free service. Why are we allowing that?
And it's strange that this is an implementation problem, and perhaps like the other day, what I heard was actually not what I heard, what I saw, an religious organization bragging about the fact that they stopped termination services at a public government hospital, and how they continue to do this work to ensure that abortions don't take place at any government or private health facility. And for that to even be possible to happen, the fact that they succeeded in doing that. Like, we can't control their actions, which is the marches against abortion and the harassing of patients and everything. But the fact that they could possibly win, stop those services, what does that mean? And do we have, I know the cabinet has gone into a lokotla and whatnot, but I'm not seeing some sense of prioritization of sexual reproductive health rights.
I mean, I think the example you're giving tells us a couple of things. I think it tells us, yes, we have an implementation problem, but it also tells us that we have a social norm problem.
Yes.
Because if I am a health practitioner and my job here is to provide that particular service, if there's an organization outside or even in the ward protesting, I'm here to provide this particular service for the people who need it. And so it speaks to the fact that protest or that disturbance resonates even with the health practitioners. And that, for me, is always scary when it comes to reproductive health, because the way that we think about women and that we think about you must produce, zalana ndinibe baningi, and that burden rests often on women alone. For me, is part of the crisis, is that we have not, you can make all the beautiful laws that you want to make, but if you don't shift the way that we think about each other, and so, for example, they always do these surveys where they ask people, would you allow a death penalty back? Majority of the country will say yes.
Want it so bad,
but
my goodness.
We protect life. Fundamentally, it's one of the fundamental rights in our constitution. And so that gives you an idea, Uguti, there are things that we have agreed to that are necessary and progressive and important that we haven't filtered them down into our society. And I'm not too sure how you do that in a context where everyone is sort of hyper religious and hyper I'll even say tribalistic, like it's very hyper mina ngubani kind of thing. And so I protect myself and my community in those kinds of ways. So yes, it's an implementation problem, but it's also a societal norm problem. The fabric of our society, and it's also just, it's 1,000 steps back. It's 2024. Why are we still talking about what I do with my body?
Yeah, and Pontsho, maybe just because when we talk religion, I'm in that space, right? But what I always say in that space is that, unfortunately, the very same constitution that affords me the right to practice my religion affords the next person the right to do. So we can't then pick and choose and say, it's good when it says to me I can practice whatever religion, but when it says this, then it's bad. And that's the blessing and the curse of having a constitution. It gives you something, it takes something from someone. When it takes something from someone, it gives you something, and we need to live with that balance.
But and the thing is, abortion laws don't take anything away from the next person.
Exactly.
Because it's about the person doing what they want with the bodily autonomy that they've been given. And like, for me, one of the things that I'm looking for, and not just because it's a GNU government, but because I think any government should take seriously, is the opposition to abortion access in South Africa. I think the sentiment is growing, and I don't think there is progressive and proactive ways to combat it. And I'd like to see a government, whether it's through these coalitions or even outside of those coalitions, government officials, government working towards ensuring that the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution and in the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act be upheld.
But your progressive caucus in Parliament, I say your as in the country, not Pontsho's personally. The country's progressive caucus in Parliament right now is made up of 2 or I don't know how many political parties. One of them is very much anti the Constitution. One of them is very much anti-abortion. And so and I think so. I mean, I think we have to. And again, the activists, the bani, who have to shift what our understanding of progressive politics is. Because what we have as a progressive caucus right now is not progressive at all. It might be progressive for particular people, but the 4 of us sitting here,
and this is why, we also, I also like saying that South Africa is circular on paper, but we're a very conservative country, and we're a very religious and cultural country that is sometimes not as progressive as we would like it to be. We'll wrap it up here. We're getting into it some more. I want you to think about what are your aspirations for the government of national unity as we wrap up.
Right.
And we're back for our last session. And Kunzima, guys, we have so many questions to get through. Our audience, again, coming through with the knowledge, coming through with the thesis, coming through with the questions that need answers. But before we even get there, one quick fire question. Who would you appoint as president to further the feminist agenda? I am not answering this question, just by the way. I'm asking it to you.
So, Phumzile Mlambo, as much as she's not in politics anymore, has always been the one woman that when I hear her speak, I think she understands the issues. You know, she's there. She has walked the journey with some of these young women that, we are talking about, who are left behind. In fact, we are also left behind, by the way. We must not think that we are somewhere ahead of others. You know, so, but yeah, if she were to say, I'm raising my hand, I think that's the one woman I would say, yeah, I'm there. I'm supporting you.
Okay, all right. Plus, she was at the UN Women, right?
You understand?
All right, I see it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I see that.
We're back.
This is a fantasy. We're playing fantasy elections, like fantasy football, right? It's a world that we aspire to with all its imperfections. Ayanda.
Nah. Angazi, you stole my choice. But,
Wow.
but, huge
B-U-T.
but enkulu kabi futhi BBL.
What?
I'm a person who reads, right? So even if Momo umuntu wesifazane, I need to know what your politics is. I need to know ukuthi uphuma phi. I need to know where your money comes from. I need to know ukuthi where your strings are being pulled before I even begin to start voting for you. So she would have been my first choice had she not been part of the African National Congress. So I don't know who I would vote for, because there were some people who I would have voted for, i.e. Anelem Da, until I read her political manifesto that was a flippant disaster of note. And I decided that is never something that I would have done, not even by mistake. So I don't know, like, women, let us zame, guys. We need to have a feminist candidate. Like, there's nobody.
Maybe you should
but
then.
Sinikona,
I should start.
So, I mean, I think Sikhona, right? And I don't say that just to toot my own horn, just because I feel fantastic about myself. But I think that, honestly, the women that I've engaged with today alone, I would vote for on any given day. I think it's important that angazi man how, but we need to start backing each other for the ballot. And of course, that comes with many questions about funding. Which political party would we go with? You know, all of those questions that are necessary and important. But I really do think, so Mina, and shame I don't have a name for you, who would I vote for, top of my head.
Same.
But I think I would much rather vote for umuntu engimaziyo osebenzela umphakathi wakhe, has been doing so for many years, or even for a few years, but prioritizes the things that I prioritize. I'd much rather vote for Ausbongile than vote for Phumzile, as much as I admire Phumzile. I also think that there's a very weird ageism thing in our politics.
Yes.
Ukuthi
To
masicabanga
speak
politician
on it.
isicabanga umuntu ona 50, ona 75.
75.
It can't be ukuthi, I mean, Umama Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma has done her work. She's done her work. You can
Retirement
disagree with
time
her, you
now.
can agree with her, you can love her, you can hate her. But she's done her work and she's played her role. She's in her 70s. There's no reason we should be voting for her as president.
Yeah,
Bona leli
true,
phando,
especially
they've
with our
also
young
done their
population, right?
Yeah.
And I think another question that for me is so important and also comes from our audience is around feminist and gender narratives, right? We have a Speaker of Parliament who's a woman. We have women in some key positions across governments, provincial and national, right? But what are the narratives around gender and feminism we think should be there in the GNU that are not there?
I'll leave them to answer that one. There's one that for me. There's one for me where I'm like, each time I speak to, because I come from Garangu,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And when I look at some of the women who, because of spatial planning, still need to catch a taxi, to go get a bus, to go get on a train. And we never see feminism in that space because feminist agenda should be about changing that for them.
Yeah.
You know, it can't be that in the 30 years of democracy, you still have to leave your home at 4 a.m. to get to work at 8 a.m.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Your safety is a feminist
You
issue.
understand?
The fact that you're not raising your children because you're
Yes.
spending 4 to 6 hours commuting is a feminist issue. The kind of food that your family then eats, and then, you know, we wonder why people will go by kota or like all these unhealthy choices of food or whatever we want to call them that villainizes the
poor.
conditions of being impoverished into, you know, these
Yes,
decisions.
like the sugar tax. I'll even call it out. I'll call it out as fast as there is something that is so anti-poor about the sugar tax that just it there's something in me, because I just read the study's in my laptop. I haven't read it yet, but there is a study that was commissioned by the Human Research Council of South Africa, and it's research from my home province, Zululand. And it's
KwaZulu.
yes,
KwaZulu-Natal.
KwaZulu-Land, KwaZulu-Natal. So in Zululand, particularly where I'm from, KwaDlangezwa, they were researching hunger. And what they researched was that people in Zululand are food insecure. And when I think about how women in Zululand, you hear often, similar to Eastern Cape, of families passing away. This would happen when I was young, growing up. You'd hear, oh no, so-and-so has passed away, her and her children have died. But it turns out that it's because they were so food insecure that they could not feed themselves. And then you turn around and you're going to be like, yeah, but then, you know, the Speaker of Parliament is a woman. Yeah, what does that matter to the person who is sitting there hungry? Or what does that matter to the pregnant woman who has to walk 13 kilometers
that story
to the
was
hospital
wild.
in order to get in fact, what is NHI going to do for a woman who is pregnant? What is the Speaker of Parliament going to do in her representation as a woman for the person who is in Garangoa having to catch 3 taxis to go to school? As a 7-year-old child. And so you are right to say that the way in which we frame our feminist issues, it needs reframing, because a lot of the time, and I'm going to say this, there's a reason why I call myself a Black intersectional feminist, because we need to understand that feminism in and of itself is not enough, because there's such a thing as white feminism, right? Because we as Black people, we exist at an intersection, especially as women, especially if you're a queer, disabled Black woman, if you're a trans woman. This week alone, we've just heard a tragedy about a trans woman being shot and killed. And so we need to make sure that the narratives which we ourselves as activists are pushing out are there on the ground, and they are reflective of the societies in which we ourselves are living in. Otherwise, we are not going to be doing ourselves a service as South Africans and as feminists and as Black intersectional feminists in general.
And I'm so glad you bring up intersectionality, right? Because I think intersectionality then relates to gender responsive budgeting and how other policies within non-women, you know, like ones that would not necessarily be categorized as women's issues or women's business, right? But need to have the feminist lens, the gender responsive lens. Let's talk about just gender responsive budgeting. Londi, any thoughts?
And I say because I one of the most frustrating things about the last 30 years, maybe let's say 15 years, is the in compartmentalizing of particular issues as women's issues or as issues the LGBTI community. The separation and I mean, I think there's always a need for specialized attention, right? There's always a need for that. But as soon as you have a situation where we don't understand education in a gendered lens, because girls can't go to school once a month for a week or two because they're on their period. As soon as you don't understand education through the lens of gender justice or gender responsiveness, then we have a crisis because you're thinking about education in as if sonke we interact with the education system in the same way. It's girls who are in urban areas who are not poor don't have to struggle once a month ngamaphed, whereas poor girls have to struggle every month, right? And then again, sekufanele kube Soul City who must then go beyohambisa ama-cabs. Why is it ukuthi lezo zinto are not available in our education system?
In our
So
budgets,
when you build a school, awacabanga ama-pads, mawucabanga the resourcing of the school. It's strange. And so for me, I think gendered governance or like a government that is responsive, it also includes and talks to where you put your money. Where do we put? So we talk about the NHI. There are many fantastic things about the NHI. We can talk about where we are, how we implement, how that would be a crisis.
Yeah,
but who would it alleviate the most? Even in the context where that woman has to walk for that many kilometers, but when she reaches the hospital, God, I'm petrified that this is the example I'm making. But what kind of access and what kind of service do they then receive because of the NHI or in the absence of the NHI? And so for me, I think when we think about the budget and we think about the different portfolios and the different ministries, I think every single ministry should have some kind of gendered understanding of the work that they do. So the Department of Military Vets or the Department of... because a lot of military vets who are women have been left out of the disarmament process, of the DDR process, right? But if that department had a gendered lens, had a gendered understanding of whatever it is, the thing that they're dealing with as a portfolio or as a committee or as a department, we'd be talking about a very different kind of conversation.
Phinah, we were talking yesterday around even the teenage pregnancy or learner pregnancy policy, right? That how we're happy that the policy's there, but through thinking about education, this was not considered, something that should be taken into priority, and that's why there had to be advocacy, and the government saw the need to take it back to the people, to civil society, to communities, to be like, what kind of support does a pregnant learner have to get, right? But also, why is this learner pregnant? How is she pregnant? Exactly, right? And what are the mechanisms around there? But more, where our conversation went around, what happens to that child when the mother has to go back to school? What support systems have they been put together within the Department of Education to ensure support, for instance?
And also, it's not a burden we should put on the Department of Education, right? Because it's a societal issue. We spoke about social norms, how we've normalized, the abuse of young women. And remember, when I'm pregnant, even if it's a boy in my class who impregnated me, he continues with life. My life stops for a certain time. And we don't address these issues because then the conversation gets way to, what about the boys? What about what?
What about the boy child?
And all those things that come into play. But at the core of it, when Pontsho, is that, young women, young black women, because we must also be clear, who are we talking about here? Young black women have been failed by society, by policies, by everybody, including the families they come from, but also those families, we can't totally blame them because they are also failed by the system. So it's like we are just transferring this, every generation comes. This dysfunction continues with every generation, and we are not addressing the issues. Instead of capitalizing on, or in fact, not even capitalize, instead of looking at where are the real issues, like you say, we then address these young women. Valani, Nitini.
Hey!
Close the legs.
open your books.
Go open your books, close the legs. All that narrative that problematizes this young black woman, instead of saying, but where is the issue? Why do we still see the same issue occurring? Then we don't get to the conversation where we say, how do we support and where do we get, the support for the child now when the mother needs to go back to school? Because we are now focusing on this girl and why she fell pregnant and why she didn't close her legs.
That story, it's reminding me very vividly of a memory of mine in school where, unfortunately, one of the girls that I went to school with was and she fell pregnant. And as girls, we had to come up with, now we need solutions. And if there's one thing young black women will do is find solutions to come. Abortion has existed since humans have existed. And what I have known since the age of 13 is something that a doctor told me is mitigating circumstances. And what those are the circumstances under the Choice Abortion Act in which you as a person can have an abortion. Now, the reason why I'm telling this story is because as a 13-year-old girl, I had to go to my friend and say, girl, this is how you're going to lie in order for you to get your abortion at the hospital. Because I had to read up myself that because you're age 13, girl, you can walk into a hospital and just don't move. Just don't move. Just sit there and they're supposed to serve you. Not only that, the mitigating circumstance here is that because you are young and because of your age and now you're 5 months, they have to give you an abortion even though you're past 3 months. But now, how do I know that?
As a 13-year-old.
Why do you have to know that?
How do I know that?
Why do you have to know that?
As a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
It's so scary to me that it's something that I normalized. I normalized that.
Yeah.
I normalized that behavior of finding ways in which I have to help my friends go through who have went through the most horrific things. And we are young, we're children having to deal with these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's so scary to me that as young as I was, at least I had the privilege to know that, and again, Soul City.
Soul City.
Soul City. Soul City.
Soul
Seriously.
Soul
Soul bodies. Honestly, if it wasn't for those pamphlets that we would get at school, the booklets that we would get, where would I be? Where would my classmate be? Where would our generation be in learning about HIV and learning about safe sex and learning about human trafficking, learning about our rights? Our rights.
True.
This is so important. I cannot thank Soul City enough. A generation has been saved. A generation,
we need to save more
and we need to save more generations. But
Yeah.
for me personally, if I didn't have pamphlets after pamphlets after pamphlets, have access in my library, in my school, have teachers be like, oh, there's a Soul City pamphlet for you guys to give away. If the Soul City people weren't there on boots on the ground, making sure that we know what safe sex is, making sure that we know that if there's a child who we go to school with that is HIV positive, it's okay to touch them. It's okay. You're not going to get sick. You can be friends with this person. We don't know this kind of information until somebody gives it to us.
True.
And we need to make sure that institutions and NGOs like Soul City are protected because they are doing the work. Because government is not doing this work at the level that they should be doing it at. They are not. And we need these kinds of NGOs because they literally, I cannot state this enough when I say, you save lives. You save lives.
Yeah, that's free PR.
Yeah,
you
no.
know, like you've done Pontsho's job.
did not ask for that. Disclaimer.
But you are right, and each time, I mean, when I talk to young people, and it's like, where is this information sitting? Because we think it's out there.
Yeah.
You know, we say they should know. You know, but they don't.
Yeah. And this comes to my other last question. Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry, Ayanda, for the story and
It's
your
just a happy, sad
friend.
story. And look, I'm just happy because at least, and like it's such a full circle moment for me
Yeah.
because like I'm sitting in it with this, and I'm talking in a panel with the organization that that literally helped shape my feminist ideology.
Oh, wow.
Like really in a serious way. Those pamphlets and those books, I even remember the different colors. There would be one in purple and there'll be one in green, and it's different themes, and the colors would have different themes, and they'd speak about and they'd speak to different issues such as alcoholism, safe sex, you know, HIV, and they'd be color coded. There'd be like different pamphlets that would be written in Braille. Before Braille was even something that was in the zeitgeist when it comes to talking about copywriting, like blind people had access to this information. And so thank you once again. It's just a full circle moment for me.
Yeah, we thank you. My last question is really, what is the one issue? I know there are many issues. We've talked about all the issues today. What is the one issue, feminist issue, that you would like GNU to prioritize? Go.
Transphobia.
Social protection.
Inclusion.
For me, is access to abortion. And with that, we'll wrap it up, and we will hold the leaders that we have, whether we voted for them or we
not,
didn't, accountable. Thank you so much to all of you for being here and sharing your incredible insights with us.
Thank
Thank you.